These are all the books that I've read this year. Are they all good? So here we have 15 books and we're gonna rank them using tier list. Quick note, I'm Georgian and I read in Georgian, so you're gonna see these beautiful letters everywhere. And sometimes the design in Georgian publishing doesn't really match the English publishing. Keep that in mind too. The first book is Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving F. It is a great book, it doesn't beat around the bush, it just goes straight to the point, gives you few lessons on how to tackle your problems instead of just being inactive and being just anxious about them, and gives you a perspective that if you tackle your problems, if you're gonna go like head on to them, there's gonna be less of a stress and more achievement kind of feeling. It's not woo-woo kind of tactic, it's actual tactic that you can use in your everyday life. So give it a read, definitely. I would put that A tier. It's well written, it's interesting, engaging. So what else do you need from a book? Like, it is a great book. A. So next book, Dale Carnegie, How to Develop Self-Confidence and Influence People by Public Speaking. If you're a Carnegie fan, I have bad news. This book is nothing special. At least to me, it's more of a like time-wasting side reading this book. There's a few things that you can take away from this book, adapt to your everyday life. Probably will have positive results, but those things are not groundbreaking. They're just, I don't know, man. It's just D. It goes to D. George Clason, The Richest Man in Babylon. It is an amazing book. It talks about very basic things about money that, you know, sometimes the most basic things are most overlooked things. And so I think it's very important to refresh our minds and refresh our knowledge about those fundamentals every now and then. And this book does it very, like, superbly. The author is kind of teaching you these basics in a fictional world, and that fictional world is so amazing. It's such a nice read. Honestly, I think I would like read it anywhere in the near future. It is so nice to read this one. Like, basic but very important things are discussed in this book. Genuinely one of the greatest books for self-improvement, at least. So give it a read. It's definitely an S tier book for me. Maybe time will change the ratings somewhere in the future, but for now it's definitely S tier. Blue Ocean Strategy. This is one of those books that I think are extremely overrated. I knew about the strategy years before. I used to study business, so that's how I knew about the strategy. There was pretty much no additional knowledge that I acquired by reading it than what I knew. Basically, one thing that I can tell you is that if you know what this book is all about, just search Blue Ocean Strategy, read about it for like 30 minutes, 1 hour at most. You're basically gonna know at least most of what this book is talking about. I don't even know what this book is talking about for this many pages. Unless you really want to read the book, then read the book, but you know, that's my viewpoint on this whole thing. So it goes to C tier. Hector Garcia and Francis Morales. Ikigai. Interesting, not super, not over the top, nothing groundbreaking, nothing life-changing, but there are some interesting things about this book. It talks about how important socializing is for us, how important our nutrition is, and so on and so forth. So you shouldn't overlook this book. This shouldn't be on a priority list. It's one of those things that if you read this book, there's quite a few things that you can take away, adapt to your life. So where does Ikigai go? I'll put it in B tier because it's not the most engaging book. It's not the most fundamental things that you should definitely have in your life book, but it's good. It's definitely good, solid B tier book. Marshall Goldsmith, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. I'm not gonna waste too much time on this book. Basically unimportant. If you read the title and you're gonna be like, oh, so I need this new strategist. It's not about that. This book is advertisement for his services. That's what I took away from this book. Mostly not worth your time. D tier. A slight deviation from the whole thing. Not a self-improvement book, but it is a very, very, very phenomenal book. George Orwell, 1984. I really don't like fictional books. I think, like, to me, they're very boring. I don't know why, I'm just a weird guy, just, you know, whatever. But even though it's fiction, it is such a wonderful read. One of those books that you cannot stop reading. Absolutely amazing read, well written. The things that this book talks about, very important too. Maybe you can use them in self-improvement kind of way, because, you know, just read this book. Definitely read it. S tier. Oh boy, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. This is probably the most overrated book of all time. I think one thing that this book does well is to put fire under your belly and just to motivate you. Outside of that, it has few things like organize before you start, like plan ahead, and those kind of like general things like, okay, those are good advices, but it doesn't follow through on those advices, you know, it doesn't give you like strategies on how to do it. The author himself says in the very beginning of the book that there's a secret in this book, and that secret is repeated at least once every chapter. You have to read between the lines kind of thing. There's not a secret. It's just, no. I kind of feel like saying that he was trying to scam people by saying that, but just, I don't know, man. You're not gonna get rich reading this book, definitely. It's just, nah. Mind all the negatives that I said about this book, but it does two things. The one, which is not super well done, is like plan ahead and those kind of general advices. What this book does very well is motivate you. And does pretty well, I'll be fair. So for that reason, I would go with C tier. Atomic Habits by James Clear. One of the greatest books that I've read. Definitely an S tier book. This doesn't beat around the bush, doesn't do all this BS, doesn't do the woo-woo kind of thing. Strategy, like very, very tangible strategy on how to develop new habits and forget bad habits. This guy just gives you a blueprint, and the book itself is structured really well. If you're a human being, pick this book up, I would definitely suggest. So this book definitely goes into S tier, no questions asked. Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. If you read the title, The Power of Positive Thinking, and you thought it was some neuroscience-y thing, I thought the same. That's why I picked up this book. I have no problem with people that choose certain faiths or are born into a certain faith. Do whatever you want. What I don't like, what this author does. So there was an example of, in this book, a husband and wife had a problem. And the author of this book told the wife to go to a priest. And that priest told this woman to, you know, you should speak to your husband about the problems that you're having, about this and that, and then figure out solutions. And also you should probably pray. So that was the advice. They talk about their problems, whatever, they solve the problems. Sometime later, they're happier than they were before. This author goes, see what God does? I'm like, maybe, but you're just gonna ignore the whole thing that they had a grown-up conversation and they figure out the solutions to their problems, and those kind of things just bugs me. Again, I'm not against of any religion. You just gotta be rational about things at times. That's what I'm saying. So that's why this book goes into D tier. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Dale Carnegie, the second Dale Carnegie book. So this book is far better than the other book that we just reviewed. It has more things to take away from it. It just will help you in relationships here and there. It does job decently well. So I'm gonna put it in, let's just go with C tier. Alfred Adler, Understanding Human Nature. Very, very interesting book. This book is very, very, very dark to read from time to time. Sometimes it just emotionally feels hard to read some parts of this book, because you understand how even the smallest of things in your childhood, maybe a nuclear explosion in your adulthood. Let me just give you a story here. There was a grown-up, an adult man, who was always afraid that his girlfriends would leave him for another guy. Psychologists deducted that his fear was coming from a childhood experience. And this is what his childhood experience was. He himself, his brother, I think was 5 years old or so. His brother was like 3, and there was his mom as well. All three of them were walking down the busy streets. His mom was holding him in her hands. And at some point his mom thought, okay, so this child older than the other child is like 3, it makes more sense to pick him up. Smaller one needs more protection. And that act that his mom dropped him to pick his little brother up made him, throughout this adulthood make him feel that his girlfriends would leave him for another guy. Sometimes it's really hard to read, really dark, to analyze and really learn about those kind of things. I would definitely recommend this book to anyone. It probably goes A tier, like solid A tier book. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. This is Ralph Sawyer edition. Not what I expected. Most of this book is kind of brief overview of Chinese history. Very interesting, not gonna lie, but not what I expected, not what I wanted. There was a small section of Sun Tzu. Nothing over the top, nothing too disappointing. It doesn't deserve C, but it's not a strong B either. So I'm still gonna put it in B tier. Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power. It is such a phenomenal book, such a well-written book. He took his time, he put in so much effort. Like, you can feel it when reading this book. It is so well structured. An amazing book, literally amazing book. Again, no BS, no nothing, just straight to the point kind of book. If you are searching for something like that, definitely give it a read. Even though you may think that you know how power games are, you think you know all that's going on? I thought so, and after reading this book, I can see more of it. No questions asked, S tier. This is Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. The things that this book talks about are very important, don't get me wrong. 10 or so years ago, I've listened to an audiobook, Predictably Irrational. Before listening to that book, I thought that I was an extremely rational person. That book has opened my mind on how many things I'm irrational about and in how many ways I am very, very irrational. Those two books are very similar to one another. This book is great, don't get me wrong. It is one of those books that you like the contents of that book, but you have a hard time reading it. This book almost like repels you. I had literally to like push myself to read this book. And this book is extremely stretched out. This book can be half its size, like literally half its size, and not lose any important information. Very boring to read, extremely stretched out. So that's why this book, I would probably put it in C tier. So thanks for watching. It was a pleasure ranking these books with you. By the way, the Atomic Habits by James Clear, the one that I've ranked, I've made a video solely based on that, and you can click here and just watch it, or somewhere. It's gonna be somewhere here, and you just click that